Good morning, listeners of Hot Topic and Fresh News. It is now 2:46 in the morning on the 2nd of December, 2023, and we have some urgent news for you. The 7-day humanitarian truce in Gaza ended yesterday with a resumption of violence. Israeli jets targeted 200 locations in the Gaza Strip just hours after U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken left Tel Aviv. Blinken stated that Israeli officials had pledged to minimize civilian casualties before resuming their assaults on southern Gaza, blaming Hamas for launching rocket attacks before the ceasefire ended and for reneging on certain hostages release agreements. Since the fighting resumed, the Gaza Health Ministry has reported that 178 Palestinians have died, with hospitals stretched to their limits by severe injuries. Israeli officials did not permit aid deliveries into Gaza yesterday, but they have indicated that supply routes will reopen. This ceasefire was agreed upon and extended twice to facilitate negotiations for the exchange of hostages kidnapped from Israel during Hamas-led raids on October 7th. It also permitted increased humanitarian aid to reach Gaza. The United States maintains that post-war Gaza must remain under Palestinian control, while Israeli officials deny plans to occupy the territory, but are considering strategies that could affect its territorial integrity, including a possibility of establishing a security buffer along the Gaza border to deter Hamas from amassing military capabilities close to the boundary. Stay tuned for more updates on this critical situation. Good morning, listeners. This is your host, Emily.
And this is David News Talk joining you all today.
We're here every day on Hot Topic and Fresh News, bringing you the latest and most vital news. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on those notifications so you don't miss a beat. Straight to the hot topics, let's go!
Could you break down the ending of the 7-day humanitarian pause in Gaza for our listeners?
Certainly. Despite international pleas, the ceasefire ended with renewed aerial bombardment and rocket fire. Both Israel and Hamas have pointed fingers at each other for the resulting escalation.
What role did U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken play?
Blinken had been in Tel Aviv, and shortly after his departure, Israeli jets began targeting the Gaza Strip. He stated that the Israeli government had agreed to a clear strategy to avoid civilian casualties amid growing U.S. pressure to alleviate the war's grave humanitarian toll.
And what of the accusations against Hamas?
Blinken accused Hamas of prematurely ending the truce and failing to fulfill commitments regarding the release of specific hostages.
What is the current situation in the hospitals in Gaza?
The Gaza Health Ministry reported that 178 Palestinians had died since the fighting restarted. Hospitals are struggling with a massive influx of severely injured patients, and they're reaching their limits.
What does this mean for aid deliveries to Gaza?
Israeli officials did not allow aid deliveries into Gaza, but have stated they'll resume deliveries. However, White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said that it would only be dozens of trucks, not hundreds.
What was the purpose of the ceasefire?
The ceasefire was agreed upon and extended twice to facilitate hostage exchanges and increase the amount of humanitarian aid entering Gaza.
What can we expect moving forward?
It's tough to say. The situation is highly volatile. Surveillance will continue on the developments and implications for both Gaza and Israel.
What are the current efforts to resume the truce in Gaza?
According to John Kirby, the administration is deeply engaged in trying to reinstate the pause. Efforts are being made literally by the hour to resume the truce, and they remain hopeful that another pause could be executed.
What is the current status of the hostages?
The Israel Defense Forces, or IDF, said it had notified the families of 4 more hostages of their deaths and returned the body of a 5th to Israel.
How is the IDF preparing for the next stage of the conflict?
The IDF is preparing for the next stage of conflict, specifically in southern Gaza. Along with bombings, they've dropped leaflets warning residents they're now in combat zones and launched an interactive map to instruct citizens when to evacuate.
What seems to be the cause of the resumption in fighting?
There's a dispute over this. The government spokesman Alan Levy blamed Hamas for not releasing all the kidnapped women, whereas a senior Hamas official argues it was Israel that ended the truce by rejecting their deal.
What's the potential impact of this resumed conflict on regional diplomacy?
The renewed conflict has complicated ongoing mediation. Qatar, which has been hosting the talks over the pause in fighting, expressed deep regret at the resumption of the Israeli aggression against Gaza.
So, what else can you tell us about the situation in southern Gaza?
The situation is dire. Dozens of people were killed in strikes following the end of the 7-day pause in fighting. As the conflict continues, we can only expect the humanitarian crisis to exacerbate. The latest reports suggest that we may be nearing the end of hostage releases from Hamas. A U.S. official indicated that Hamas may have released all or nearly all of the hostages it is currently prepared to. However, there are still 137 hostages in Gaza, mostly men, including many soldiers.
What are Hamas's demands regarding the prisoners?
Hamas has called for a greater number of prisoners to be released than the previously agreed ratio during the pause, which was 3 Palestinians for each hostage.
Could you provide a bit of context regarding the hostage and prisoner releases during the pause?
During the pause, Hamas released more than 100 Israeli and foreign hostages, most of them women and children. On the other hand, Israel released 240 Palestinian prisoners, mostly women and teenagers detained for actions like rock throwing and incitement.
Can you give us some insight into the scale of violence and detentions since the Hamas attack?
Since the Hamas attack, Israel has detained around 3,400 Palestinians. The Gaza Health Ministry mentioned that the Israeli military campaign has resulted in more than 13,300 deaths.
What's Israel's strategy moving forward?
An Israeli official mentioned that they believe applying more military pressure on Hamas could lead to further hostage releases in the future. They're planning a high-intensity operation in the coming weeks, shifting to a low-intensity mode afterward.
What is the U.S.'s stance on control of Gaza after the war?
The U.S. has insisted that Gaza must remain under Palestinian control post-war. While Israel is not planning to occupy the territory, it does have plans that could affect its integrity, including a possible security buffer on the Gaza side of the border.
So, how are the residents of Gaza reacting to these developments?
Residents are understandably panicked. For instance, a mother in Gaza City's central Rimal neighborhood, a focus of the fighting, heard tank fire and immediately sprang into action. The current situation is incredibly volatile for the people living there. Just to pause a moment and recap for those who are just tuning into our discussion. We've been addressing the ongoing conflict in Gaza. The situation is tense, with ongoing efforts to resume a truce. There's a dispute about who is to blame for the breakdown of the recent pause in fighting, with Israel and Hamas each pointing fingers at the other.
Indeed, an intense time not only for those directly involved, but also for the world watching closely.
Yes, the hostage situation is particularly concerning. There are still 137 hostages in Gaza, primarily men and many soldiers. Hamas, on the other hand, demands the release of a greater number of Palestinian prisoners than the previously agreed ratio.
And we've seen significant violence and detentions since the Hamas attack. The humanitarian situation continues to worsen.
Absolutely, with over 13,300 deaths attributed to the Israeli military campaign, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. In this complex situation, the plans for future military operations and control of Gaza are being closely watched. But let's continue with our discussion. This situation reminds me of a recent report I read about another conflict zone. The report mentioned how families were forced to relive the horrors of war, with children being told to stay away from windows and families moving to lower floors or basements in an attempt to stay safe.
What a stark reminder of the human toll of such conflicts. Interestingly, I came across a related story from another region recently. A similar strategy was adopted by families there, in anticipation of an assault they hoped wouldn't come.
It's truly heartbreaking. The Gaza situation in question is no different. A resident named Reem revealed her family's desperate attempts to stay safe during the resumption of Israel's air and ground assault. The ceasefire had given them a glimmer of hope, which was sadly shattered.
And the humanitarian situation is worsening. The World Food Program warns that the risk of famine and starvation is growing, despite increased aid during the pause.
Absolutely, and the healthcare system is under immense pressure. James Elder from UNICEF gave a first-hand account of the situation in southern Gaza. The constant bombardment has forced people to stay indoors, and hospitals, like the Al-Nasser Hospital, are overwhelmed, operating at 200% capacity.
It's a situation with no easy solutions or safe havens. As the Israeli offensive reactivates, the inhabitants are terrified of having to relocate again.
And the future seems uncertain. With Israel intending to designate some neighborhoods in southern Gaza as deconfliction areas, residents are unsure about what lies ahead. Despite this, the IDF has declared Khan Yunis a dangerous combat zone, directing residents to move further south to Rafah near the Egyptian border. The situation in Gaza is indeed complex. These developments are not only being reported here in New York but from global perspectives as well. Journalists in Dubai, Beirut, and London are contributing to our understanding of these events.
Yes, it's a global effort to bring the reality of this conflict to light. And the facts are stark. According to local health officials, the resumption of strikes has resulted in the deaths of 178 people in Gaza.
The human toll is heavy. And there's news about the hostages as well. Some have been released by Hamas, while others remain captive in Gaza.
I've been reading some of the stories shared by those hostages. They reveal a grim picture of thin rations and heavy bombing. I can't even begin to imagine what they've been through.
It's a difficult reality to face, but it's important to continue shedding light on these stories. As we wrap up today's segment, let's remember the importance of staying informed about these crucial global issues. That wraps up another episode of Hot Topic and Fresh News. We appreciate your time as we dived into the latest headlines, unraveling the developments and implications. Remember, your engagement helps keep the conversation going, so feel free to subscribe, activate notifications, and share your thoughts in the comments. And don't stop there, share our discussions with your circles. News is better when it's a shared experience.
Oh, definitely. And remember, we're your daily digest of important news, served fresh and hot. Don't forget, we're here every day. And I hear a little birdie saying that we have some fascinating discussions on the horizon, so you really don't want to miss out.
Indeed, it's going to be interesting. But that's all we have for today. Thank you for tuning in, for being part of this journey with us. We're excited to explore more hot topics with you in the next episode.
Absolutely. And don't forget our motto, folks, Smith, stay in the loop, keep your eyes on the news, our channel's content will amuse.